Welcome to NHL Wraparound Short Shifts for Friday, 10th of October, 2025. Vic and Neil with you. We are back at it again, my friend.
We're only a couple of days into the season, but we've seen some crazy stuff already, and you can't trust a lead in the NHL. You've got to watch the game till the very, very end, as we will prove once again later on when we get to a certain game. You never know what's going to happen.
Right at the end of the show, in fact. So that's a good tease for folks to stay with us throughout. But first thing I want to touch on is before pucks were even dropped, we had a couple of big contract extensions in advance of two players in particular, their individual games. Jack Eichel, an 8-year, $13.5 million AAV, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points in his first 2 games since signing that deal. That will kick in next year. And Kyle Connor for Winnipeg, 8 years, $12 million per season. Pretty much the same deal as Mitch Marner. It is the largest contract in Jets history with a full no move in there. He had a hat trick in a 5-4 opening night loss to Dallas on Thursday. And of course, both of these deals come on the heels of Kirill Kaprizov's extension, 8 years, $17 million per. He had 3 assists in a 5-0 opening night win in St. Louis on Thursday. So certainly some early impact from some very large extensions. And in our discussion with Jeff Marek in our season preview, we have to get used to these big deals. And this is the landscape now. Perhaps there will be corrections at some point, but this is the way of the world now.
You've got to get used to it, but you don't have to like it. I mean, for $17 million, which Kaprizov's not making, by the way, until next season, he should score all 5 goals against St. Louis, not get 3 assists. I mean, it's ridiculous, especially for a winger. The Kyle Connor deal, 8 years at $12 million a year, U.S. in Winnipeg, Manitoba, where they already have talked about how they don't get enough support. This was a couple of years ago. The owner talked about that. And then you got Jack Eichel, who's in Vegas, who gets $13.5 million a year. I don't know. I don't know where all this is coming from, but you got to get used to the numbers, but you don't have to like them.
So with Kaprizov, Connor, Eichel, and of course Connor McDavid, who signed his extension earlier in the week, they're all off the board. Now the contracts to be looking at for extensions, or maybe not. Adrian Kempe in Los Angeles, Artemi Panarin in New York, Alex Tuch in Buffalo, and Marty Necas in Colorado. But there's also a couple of other deals that I want to talk about here because they both concern the Edmonton Oilers. Matthias Ekholm extends for 3 years, $4 million a year. That starts next season. And Jack Roslovic signed as a free agent for 1 year at $1.5 million. He tied a career high with 22 goals last season in Carolina. And what does this say by how Stan Bowman is continuing to try to build this team back up, considering the number of losses that they had last year? Zach Hyman is still going to be out until probably sometime next month. So what does this tell you in terms of what Stan Bowman is trying to do?
Well, he's sort of doing what Ken Holland was doing, which is seeing what's out there and available and fortifying their lineup. And Roslovic, I don't understand why he was still available at this time of year when he had such a good season last year with Carolina. But again, I think that Ken Holland did this very nicely for Edmonton and picking up people like Evander Kane and Corey Perry and others who came in and helped on short-term deals that were sort of left off to the side. And this is another example of that with Roslovic. I think it fortifies a team that can't be spending a lot of money on players because they know that it's all going to the McDavids and the Dreisaitl's and the Bouchards, and for that matter, Darnell Nurse. And so they've got to be careful with their pennies.
a little bit of other off-ice news before we start to get to the games. And this concerns the 5 players that were acquitted of sexual assault in July. One of them, Michael McLeod, has signed a 3-year deal with Avangard in the KHL. He had been connected with Carolina for some time, and there was some backlash from fans there, so perhaps the Hurricanes decided, nope, we can't do this. We're going to go in a different direction. And so McLeod signs in Russia. Alex Formenton has signed a 3.5-month contract in the Swiss League, which runs through December. He is still the property of the Ottawa Senators, but GM Steve Staios has said that they are looking to trade him. The other 3 players, Carter Hart, Dylan Dubé, and Cal Foote, are still out there. These players can actually sign NHL deals effective Wednesday, October 15th, but would not be eligible to play until December 1st. So I think the closer we get to mid-October and seeing what the fate of these players are, the quicker we can get all of this behind us.
Yeah, I can't wait. To be honest with you, I can't wait to get rid of this.
All right. Nothing more to say on that for now. Hey, head coaching debuts. So let's give some props here to Dan Muse and Marco Sturm in Pittsburgh and Boston, respectively. Both are out of the gate 2-0. We know that the expectations for both the Penguins and the Bruins are not high this year, but this is why they play. And particularly in Boston, on Thursday night, coming off a really impressive win on Wednesday with Jeremy Swayman winning in Washington, Jonas Korpisalo in overtime stops Frank Nazar and Connor Bedard, and then Fraser Minton scores in overtime. So these are the little things that get a team out of the gate. They start to believe in themselves a little bit, and granted, 2 games, a very small sample size, but good starts and good on both the Penguins and the Bruins.
And it is a very small sample size, and I don't think you're going to see Dan Muse and Marco Sturm be able to pull miracles with those 2 teams. But at least for now, they get happy starts.
I did mention Korpisalo there on the upside of goaltending. We're going to have a couple of lemons as we continue to move through our rundown here. But quickly, other coaching debuts for the 9 total coaches that are in new places this year. Glenn Gulletson, Adam Foote, Lane Lambert, all coming up with wins in their first games. Mike Sullivan lost against the Penguins opening night and then won Thursday in Buffalo. Jeff Blashill 0-1-1 with the Blackhawks. Rick Tocchet lost for the Flyers in Florida on Thursday. And Joe Quenneville losing to Lane Lambert in the Seattle Ducks game. So let's go to something else here. And we talk sample sizes. Yes, perhaps in Pittsburgh and Boston, we shouldn't be getting over our skis at a 2-0 start. These are a couple of 0-1 starts on Thursday, but it's almost like the uh-oh factor is here already. Here we go again. Buffalo Sabres, 14 consecutive years without making the playoffs. They're shut out by the Rangers 4-0. Fans are booing towards the end of that game. You got to know that patience is wearing thin there, even after one game. And in Detroit, where the Red Wings haven't made the playoffs in 9 years, they get a goal early from Dylan Larkin. Little Caesars is going nuts. And then they just get pasted the rest of the way. 5-1 to Montreal. John Gibson, 5 goals against on 13 shots. He's pulled with 2:48 left in the second after a goal by Uri Slafkovsky. And what does that say here? Because Jeff Marek had made the point in our season preview that if goaltending was really the center of the woes in the Motor City, this didn't give fans there a lot of reason for confidence, even though it's only one game. And what does it say that a goaltender gets pulled with less than 3 minutes left in a period. He doesn't even finish the second before the switch is made over to Cam Talbot.
Well, I think the bigger statement here is that the Montreal Canadiens come in on the second of back-to-back nights and beat Detroit on opening night in Detroit, 5-1. I think that that's really the issue here, is that Detroit saw that they've got a tired group coming in out of Toronto who had to leave Toronto, go through customs, do all that you have to do when going back into the United States, and are still able to clobber them 5-1 in the opener of Detroit. Yes, Gibson didn't play well, obviously, pulled with 2:48 left to go, and not completing the second period says a lot about the way that their coaching staff felt that he was playing. But I think the worst part for me is your hopes are high for Detroit for this season, or you're hoping they're going to break this non-playoff run, and they get pasted 5-1 by a tired Montreal Canadiens team who's not a playoff team of certainty. I mean, they made it. They were a minus 21 last season. This is not a great team in Montreal. So I think that's very concerning. On the Buffalo side of things, 14 straight years out of the playoffs, and the Rangers come in. They're winning 1-0 most of the game, and then the floodgates open up a little bit later on in the second half of the third. But for Lindy Ruff, I'd be looking over my shoulder now already after one game, because I don't know how these people are going to stand for another season like this, and it's starting off exactly where we left off last year.
It's funny because in our season preview, neither of us nor Jeff had Lindy Ruff on the hot seat on our lists. But after that first game and seeing how the Sabres performed, they did have a couple of injuries, including Owen Power. But to come out of the gate as bad as they did last night, the Rangers really dominated them in the first period. They started to play better as the night went along, but then gave up the second goal and a couple of empty netters. And when it's all said and done, it's same old, same old. And I think the Sabres have enough experience at this that you cannot fall behind the eight ball this early in the season. Again, it's one game. They're one win from being back in contention for a playoff spot again. But you get out of the gate 2-8, as they have done in the past, and you've got to paddle upstream the entire season. It can't happen. The alarm, the red flags, they're up early in both Buffalo and Detroit.
Absolutely, and you know, you're talking about, as we said, in Detroit, Montreal gets beaten 5-2 by Toronto the night before, and yet is able to come in and beat you 5-1. When you're talking about the Rangers, they of course had lost their home opener on Tuesday night to the Penguins 3-0. Buffalo had yet to play a game. This was their first game of the season, and they weren't able to do anything. And the Rangers are a non-playoff team too. They're not as if they were any great shakes. So I'd be concerned if you're in Buffalo and Detroit, your frustration level has to be through the roof today.
Let's look at some first games for players in new places. Mitch Marner, the Vegas Golden Knights, had 2 assists in his first game against the Kings on Wednesday, nothing on Thursday in their win at San Jose. Nikolai Ehlers, no points, 2 shots in 19 minutes and 35 seconds in the Hurricanes win against the New Jersey Devils. But AndreMiller, 2 goals, +1, 1909 playing time in that very same game. Dust off that Norris Trophy, Neil.
Oh, yeah. Yes, sure. Pretty good opening night, though, for AndreMiller. He'll be a fan favorite there with nights like that.
And remember what Marek had said about defensemen that come into Carolina and they play in that system, that nobody is able to set up defensemen better than the Hurricanes. And at least for one night, that's certainly true with Miller.
Give him the credit that he's due.
Yep.
And he may fit in very, very well with Coach Brindamore's system.
Other players, Noah Dobson, for the Canadiens had an assist in the win at Detroit. J.J. Peterka held pointless with 2 shots in the mammoth loss at Colorado. Matthew Schaefer for the New York Islanders, number 1 overall draft pick, gets his first career point, an assist on Jonathan Drouin's goal. It was the first goal for the Islanders this season in their 4-3 loss in Pittsburgh. And Jonathan Toews playing his first game in 2.5 years. Hadn't played since April 13, 2023. 2 shots in the 5-4 loss for the Jets against the Dallas Stars. So moving on to some other stuff. Leon Draisaitl hits the 400 mark for his career power play goal in the shootout loss to Calgary on Wednesday. Of course, that goal coming from the off wing. And another player that looks like he's kind of following in that path. Pavel Dorofeev, the Vegas Golden Knights, 4 goals in his first 2 games, including a hat trick opening night against the LA Kings. 3 of his 4 goals have come on the power play. He had a career-high 35 last year. But something that I've paid attention to is 16 attempts, 9 shots on goal in 2 games. And when you've got the likes of Mitch Marner, Jack Eichel, Mark Stone, Tomas Hertl there, and Dorofeev is setting himself like Draisaitl in that circle, and he is just pumping shots at net, it would not shock me if he pots 50 this year.
Oh, that wouldn't surprise me at all. He's a natural goal scorer. Absolutely.
Matthew Knies in the Maple Leafs win over the Canadiens on Wednesday sets up the game-winning goal by Morgan Rielly midway through the 3rd period. But there are little things in a play that you see that happen to stand out more for coaches than I think for the average viewer. But he's got a partial breakaway. Lane Hudson had lost his stick, but managed to chase down Knies from behind. Knies did get a shot off. It was stopped. But instead of doing the flyby, Knies stopped, got possession of the puck, and got it out to Rielly, who scored the winning goal against Sam Montembeault. And this is the player that is supposed to replace Mitch Marner as part of the core 4. And my bigger question to you here, Neil, is I don't think Knies is a 100-point scorer, but if he could get 70 to 80 and John Tavares gets 80 and players such as Bobby McCann, Max Domi, and Nick Robertson, if these guys can push into that 50-point range, does that adequately supplement the loss of Marner offensively for the Leafs?
First of all, you didn't mention that Knies was my breakout player, one of my breakout players this season that I picked on the season preview. And you didn't mention Dylan Guentzel, who scored the only goal for Utah in their loss, and he was my other breakout player this season.
I've got plenty of time to get to that. You know that.
Well, I don't see it on the rundown, so I just thought I would bring it up myself. I think that the Toronto Maple Leafs aren't going to have as good a regular season as they had last year when they had Marner, but they may have a better playoff because they might be a better rounded team for the playoff tournament. But in the regular season, you know, Marner's going to get his points, and that's going to give you some wins on nights when maybe you shouldn't win. I think the Leafs are okay. They've got a good team. They've still got a good team even without a Mitch Marner, but I don't think they'll be, you know, the offensive machine now without him that they were last year.
And this is where it's going to be important for other players that have been in those 30, 40-point ranges to try it up a notch by maybe 10 points, and that could make some sort of a difference. And as you said, may not be as good in the regular season, but in 6 months from now, may be more primed to make a legitimate cup run. Another team I want to talk about here is the LA Kings, because they lost opening night to Colorado and had to go back-to-back into Vegas. Had a 3-1 lead in that game, then got into some penalty trouble with a major penalty and a 5-on-3 situation, and went down by a score of 5-3 to the Golden Knights. managed to come back and win the game in a shootout with Mitch Marner failing to keep that shootout going. But that's an enormous win for Los Angeles, who you don't want to go down 0-2. And to play the second night of a back-to-back and come back after blowing a lead is something that Kings team can build on.
Oh, absolutely. And they're playing a rested Vegas team in Vegas in their home opener and all the glitz and glamour that only Vegas brings to games. And no, it is a big confidence boost for Anze Kopitar, the captain, and his teammates that they can go in and do that on the second of a back-to-back. So I agree with you totally.
By the way, I now have a new way of trying to tolerate games that are played in Vegas. So as soon as a goal is scored, I mute the set so I don't have to hear resident carnival barker Bruce Cusick screaming the goal sequence and all of the other things that go along with the game in Vegas.
Yeah, it's minor leagues on steroids, that's for sure.
Well, here's something else in the world of piss-offery. What would it be for within the first nights of the season, this happened on opening night, that we see a big hit and then a player having to answer for that? So late in the first period in the Colorado-LA game on Tuesday, Josh Manson, great stand-up hit on Warren Fogle, and sure enough, here comes Jeff Malott of the Kings, and Manson has to answer for it. Now, Malott did get an extra 2 minutes, but as we've said, here's a situation. I don't think Manson should be penalized at all. Even if he fights, which he did, I still don't believe that the player that makes the great hit should be penalized at all if he gets challenged by an opponent.
I agree with you. I've said it last season to you, and I want to emphasize our interview that we had with Scott Stevens. We're right at the beginning of the show on the Hockey Hall of Fame edition. I asked him, you're one of the greatest open ice hitters in the game, and you've knocked people into next week. Did you ever have to fight because of a good, hard, clean check that you threw? And he said no. And so that's how the game has changed. And it's not right. Body checking is part of the game. If you got your head down and you get hit hard, you shouldn't have to fight somebody because of it. And let's face it, hockey players aren't going to turtle. The tougher players, the hard hitters, the Josh Mansons of the world, they're not going to turtle. But, just 2 minutes extra for jumping a guy and making him fight you, that's not right. They've got to change that.
I'm telling you, you penalize only the player that retaliates. You will get this out of the game tomorrow.
You're right. You've got to write that down and send it to the next GM meeting.
I've already asked Dave Jackson about it, and he actually agrees with me. So hopefully at some point, some smarter heads will come to the fore here, because this is just ridiculous that this goes on year after year. Before we start to wind this down, Bruins and the Sharks are starting their season without captains. David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy, and Hampus Lindholm will wear the A for the Bruins, and the Sharks will have 5 players wearing the A during the course of the season, including Macklin Celebrini. While you were GM of the Rangers, you always had a captain. Is it that important for every team to have a captain, or is it what works best for your particular club?
I think it's what works best for your particular situation. If there's not an obvious guy, when I was GM of the Rangers, Kelly Kissio was captain when I got there. I traded for Mark Messier, who obviously was a great captain and came in and put on the C. And then my last 3 years there, when Mark had left and gone to Vancouver, we made Brian Leach the captain. But I don't think that it's necessary that you have one. Let's look at a new captain this year who starts his first training camp with the Rangers, which is JT Miller. I was really surprised they did that. I never envisioned him being captain of the Rangers, but they did that. And I don't think that that's one of the appointments that they're going to be happy with by the end when all is said and done. But anyway, You judge your situation by who's there and let, for example, with the Sharks, let somebody stand up and stand out and say who's the leader of that team. Same on the Boston Bruins. I mean, I guess they're waiting to see who it's going to be between the guys you just mentioned, Pasternak, McAvoy, and Lindholm. Is one of them going to stand up and be captain? They obviously don't think that right now Pasternak or Lindholm or McAvoy have that overwhelming presence that you should have to be the captain. So to answer your question, no, you don't need to have a captain. You need to have leadership within the locker room, and then you see who steps forward to be the most dominant leader.
Final item here, and we are going to continue with the San Jose Sharks. Quite the late game on Thursday, where San Jose is leading this game 3-2 and playing quite well against the Golden Knights, even though Vegas was on the second night of a back-to-back. They had the opportunity to put this game away after William Eklund had two chances at an empty net, pushed the first shot wide with two players on him, but then came around the back of the net for a wraparound. Oh, there's that word. But that was stuffed by Shea Theodore. The ensuing play up the ice, Jack Eichel throws a little floater in from maybe a foot past the red line, and it bounces past Alex Nedeljkovic to tie the game. If that wasn't bad enough for the San Jose goaltender, in the overtime, he makes a misplay at the blue line, trying to go through Theodore as opposed to up the boards. Theodore gets the puck to Riley Smith, who is standing all alone in front of the net. And when I saw that play, I'm thinking even Neil Smith would have buried that one.
Absolutely. And Nedeljkovic seems to be starting up where he left off with the Penguins. He hesitated. That last goal was all because of his hesitation. Once you've come out of the net, you better go. Keep going. Go for it. But he hesitated, which came up with a mistake. The unfortunate thing with the bad bounce on the Eichel goal, that's going to happen from time to time. I wouldn't blame him so much as on that winning goal where he came out of the net, hesitated, which gave Theodore the chance to keep that puck in the zone and get it to Riley Smith, who dumped it into the empty net.
There are no games on Friday, 16 on Saturday. And I'm going to make a prediction right here because, as everybody knows that listen to our short shifts toward the end of the season, we had the Bubble Lock Challenge where I was thoroughly thrashed by my partner here. But I'm going to make a prediction that Yaroslav Askarov will be starting in net for the Sharks when they play their second game of the season against the Ducks on Saturday evening.
I think you're right. Now, by the way, it's only a couple of nights into the season here, and you've been watching all the games. You missed the TV?
Well, no, not even close. And it was great to see John Kelly on ESPN Plus last night and to watch many of my friends and former colleagues, including Steve Levy and John Tortorella and Bucci and everybody else that's working there. But in terms of missing television, no. And you know that having been on that side of the screen also, that TV is a punishing business. And when you work in production and you work in management and you deal with talent and just a lot of the day-to-day operations, it is a punishing business. And to do this for 40 years was great. There are a lot of great people. There are, quite frankly, some not great people in it also, but that's part of any business. But after 4 decades of it, and now being able to produce our own content and have our own opinions and do what we do, it makes you look back at those 4 decades and say, yeah, it was great, but quite frankly, this is better.
Well, and the thing that you can't miss, and I don't miss and I just hated was the egocentric nature of the whole thing. From production people to directors to talent, especially, the egos are out of control, and it's all about me, 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 me. And you're just not that type of person, and that's why it must feel wonderful to get out of it. I'm not that kind of person either, and I don't need that. I don't need somebody telling me after every show, great show, great show. But then you say, well, why don't you give me more shows if they're great shows? Oh, well, we can't do that because they're full of it. They're not great shows. They don't give you any feedback. They just let you, hang yourself or whatever the case may be. I just think this is fantastic doing this, and I don't want any part of going back to doing that.
So I can't say that this was a great show then.
No, you can't tell me I did a great show. You can say it was a great show, but you can't tell me I did a great show.
Fair enough. Okay, so let's give you the upcoming traffic. Typically, we would do NHL Wraparound on Monday. However, it is a holiday in the States, and there are also 5 afternoon games, so we don't want to date the material at all. So we are going to drop our latest Hall of Fame edition on Monday with Craig Patrick, the general manager of the Pittsburgh Penguins when they won their first 2 Stanley Cups in 1991 and 92, and was also Herb Brooks' assistant on the Miracle on Ice U.S. Olympic hockey team in 1980. So I think you'll enjoy that episode. Tuesday, we will have short shifts to kind of catch everybody up on what is taking place this weekend. And then NHL Wraparound will return next Wednesday. And don't forget, our new website, NHLWraparound.com. Great look, great navigation on it. Exclusive content also, including Smith's Picks, Neil's Nuggets, where we have our 8 playoff teams from each conference, and also New York Centric, that is written by our friend and colleague, Patrick Hoffman. So really good out of the gate here. Feels good to get this going for the next 9 months. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good, and I just want to give one more shout out to our good friend Stu Young, who put that whole website together and has really done a fantastic job on it. And if you ever want somebody to build a great website for you, email us, neil@nhlwraparound.com. We'll give you Stu's information. He's reasonable in what he charges, and work is great, and he's extremely easy to work with.
Stu's a terrific guy, easygoing, and as Neil said, great to work with. So, Stu, thanks again for all the work you did to make the website possible. So, with that, we've got a lot coming up next week, starting with the Hall of Fame edition with Craig Patrick, and then continuing on with short shifts. We'll probably do 2 of those episodes next week, along with NHL Wraparound. So, foot is down on the gas. Thanks for tuning in today. Have a great weekend.